It was watching me all night. I shouldn't have looked out the window. The house at the edge of the woods. I'm not the type to go looking for trouble. I like to think of myself as an ordinary man. One who works his shift, pays his bills, and keeps to himself. I'm not fearless. I'm not brave. But I've always had this one flaw, and it's a dangerous one. I'm curious. The kind of curious that makes you stop and stare into the dark just a little longer than you should. The kind that pushes you to open doors that were meant to stay shut. That flaw is why I'm telling you this story today. Because a few months ago, my curiosity nearly killed me. The house everyone avoided. I've lived in this small town for most of my life. It's not much, a strip of shops, a couple of diners, a school, and one road in and out. Everyone knows everyone, or at least knows about everyone. But there's one place here that's different. At the very edge of town, past the gas station and the last streetlight, the asphalt road crumbles into gravel. The gravel turns to dirt, and on that dirt road sits a house. Calling it run down would be polite. Its paint has long since peeled away. The roof is warped like an old book left out in the rain. And the windows, those windows, are always dark, like the eyes of something dead. The stories about it have been around for decades. Kids dare each other to run up and touch the front door. Teenagers claim they've broken in and heard whispering from upstairs. Adults laugh when they talk about it in the daylight, but none of them would be caught anywhere near it at night. And neither would I until last fall, the first time I saw it move. It started with my car breaking down. One minute I was driving home from work, the next I was on the side of the road, cursing at the steam coming from under the hood. The mechanic told me it'd take 3 days to fix, so I decided to walk home. It was only a mile, and the quickest way was straight past that house. The sun was going down, and the sky was the color of a fading bruise. I told myself not to look at it, just keep my eyes forward, keep walking. But halfway past the property, I glanced up at the second floor. Something moved in the window. It was just a shadow, a quick flicker of motion. Could have been a curtain shifting in the wind, except the window was closed. I kept walking, but the image burned itself into my head, the splinter in my mind. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about that flicker. My rational side told me it was nothing. My curious side whispered, "Go back. Check. See for yourself." By the third night, I'd stopped pretending I wasn't going to do it. I decided I would go inside, just for a few minutes, just long enough to confirm it was empty. The approach. The evening was colder than I expected, the kind of cold that creeps into your sleeves and gnaws at your fingertips. I could hear the crunch of gravel under my boots as I stepped onto the driveway, each sound feeling louder than it should in the stillness. The front door loomed ahead of me, its wood swollen and splintered from years of neglect. My breath hung in the air, fogging with each exhale. I reached out and touched the doorknob. It was colder than the air around me. When I pushed it open, the hinges groaned like something waking up after a long sleep. Inside the house, the smell hit me first: damp wood, mildew, and something faintly metallic. The living room was a skeleton of what it had once been. Furniture lay in heaps of splintered wood, the wallpaper curled away in long, brittle strips. Every sound felt sharp. My footsteps echoed too loudly, my breathing was too fast. And underneath all of it was a silence that didn't feel empty. It felt like it was listening. I told myself I'd just check upstairs and leave. The stairs. The staircase groaned under my weight. My flashlight beam danced across the walls, catching frames with photographs, so faded the faces were ghosts. The air felt heavier with each step, as if the house didn't want me going any further. Halfway up, I thought I heard something, a faint thump like a footstep. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The sound didn't come again. I convinced myself it was just the house settling. The hallway. The upstairs hallway was narrow, with doors on both sides. Some hung half open, some shut tight. At the far end, one door stood ajar, just wide enough for me to see a sliver of darkness inside. From that darkness came a sound. Breathing. It was faint but steady, not my own. The room. I should have left. Every instinct told me to turn around, go back downstairs, and walk away. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. I stepped into the room. My flashlight swept over the bare floor, the old bed frame, the broken chair, and then I saw it. In the corner, hunched over, unmoving, a figure, small, wrapped in filthy rags. Its head was bowed, face hidden. My flashlight flickered for half a second. When the light steadied, the corner was empty. The escape. That was enough. I turned and bolted for the stairs, my heart hammering in my chest. Behind me, I heard the soft creak of a floorboard, then another. Something was following me. The front door was shut. I didn't remember closing it. I slammed my shoulder into it, and it burst open, throwing me into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I reached the streetlights. Aftermath. I told myself it was all in my head. That fear had twisted my senses. That's what I believed, until the breathing followed me home. It started that same night. A faint sound in the hallway outside my bedroom. Then closer, behind me as I brushed my teeth. Then closer still, beside my bed as I tried to sleep. I've moved apartments since. I've changed locks, kept lights on, slept with a knife under my pillow. But some nights, I still hear it. That slow, steady breathing. And I know it's not mine. I told myself it was nothing. Just some night shift worker closing up shop. Or maybe a garbage bin getting rolled back into place. But the sound didn't match the picture in my head. It was too deliberate. Not rushed, not clumsy measured. Like someone wanted to make noise, but not enough to be found. I shifted my weight in the chair, feeling the wood groan under me, and pulled my hoodie tighter. The fabric was warm against my skin, but the air in the room wasn't. There was a faint draft seeping in from somewhere, maybe the window frame, and with it came a smell I couldn't place right away. Not bad exactly, just wrong. Metallic, faintly sweet, almost like blood but sharper, as if something had been burned first. My eyes kept drifting to the far corner of the street, where the lamplight didn't quite reach. It was a black triangle between two buildings, an alley I'd never paid much attention to before. But tonight, it felt like the dark in there wasn't the same as the dark everywhere else. It felt thicker. That's when the sound came again. Not the metallic thunk this time. This was softer, but more unsettling. A slow, dragging scrape. Something heavy being pulled across the ground. Not quickly, not easily, like it resisted being moved. I found myself holding my breath without meaning to, and I realized I was leaning forward so far my forehead was almost touching the cold glass of the window. I stayed there, pressed close to the glass, every muscle in my body tense without my permission. The hum of the refrigerator was still in the background, steady, ordinary, but now it felt like it belonged to another world entirely. A safe, warm world, where strange sounds didn't travel across empty streets at night. I wasn't in that world anymore. I was in this one. The one where the shadows seemed thicker, the air sharper, and every small noise hinted at something just beyond the edge of sight. I tried to convince myself to move away from the window, to stand up, walk back into the kitchen, pour myself a drink, pretend this night was like every other. But I didn't. I stayed rooted there, the way a deer stays frozen when it sees the glint of headlights, not sure if it's safer to run or to remain still. The dragging sound stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise had been. Silence at least has an answer. Yes, there's something there. But this was like the world had pressed pause. I couldn't even hear the faint rush of wind through the leaves anymore. No dogs barking in the distance, no passing cars, just stillness. And then, from the dark mouth of the alley, movement. Not fast, not sudden, just a shift, like someone, or something, had taken a single step forward, enough for the edge of their form to catch the faintest brush of the street lamp's light. My eyes strained against the distance, trying to make sense of it, but all I got was the impression of something tall. Too tall. The proportions were off, not in the way a shadow stretches against a wall, but in the way the figure was. I blinked. It was gone. I straightened up quickly, heart thudding harder now, my breath shallow. The rational part of my brain screamed that I was tired, that my eyes were playing tricks on me. But deep down I knew I hadn't imagined it. You don't imagine the way your stomach knots up when you see something that's not supposed to exist. I stepped back from the window and turned, trying to shake it off. My apartment felt smaller now, the shadows in the corners pressing closer. I moved into the kitchen, more for the comfort of the light than for anything else. The overhead bulb buzzed faintly as I flicked it on, casting a pale yellow glow across the countertops. I reached for a glass in the cabinet, telling myself I'd just drink some water and go to bed. Tomorrow, this would all feel ridiculous. I wouldn't even mention it to anyone. But as I turned on the tap, The glass under my hand slipped slightly because my fingers had gone cold. Not just cold, numb, like the blood had drained from them. The sound was back, not outside this time, from the hallway. It was faint, but I knew it was the same dragging noise. Slow, deliberate, something heavy scraping against the floor inside my building. I froze, one hand on the tap, water running unnoticed into the sink. The hallway in my apartment building is narrow, lined with a cheap carpet that muffles footsteps. For me to hear something dragging out there meant it was right by my door. I reached over, twisting the tap shut. My ears strained against the hum of the light bulb, focusing on the sound outside. It stopped again, right on cue, like it knew I was listening. Then a knock. 3 slow knocks. Not the kind of knock you give when you're impatient, or the rapid-fire pounding of an emergency. This was spaced out, deliberate, each one heavy enough to make the wood reverberate. I stood there, my back against the kitchen counter, every instinct screaming at me, do not open that door. My mouth was dry. My mind raced, trying to come up with who it could possibly be. No friend would come over this late without calling. My neighbors. I'd seen them in the hall maybe 3 times in the past year. And if it was building maintenance, they'd never knock like that. Another 3 knocks. This time softer, almost gentle. But it was worse that way. Like whatever was out there wanted me to feel safe enough to come closer. I took a step toward the door before I even realized I was moving. My socks whispered against the linoleum, each footfall sounding too loud in the stillness. The air near the door felt cooler, the faint draft sliding through the gap at the bottom, carrying that same metallic smell I'd caught before. I reached for the peephole, pressing my eye against the cold metal. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I stayed there, my heart in my throat, staring into the distorted fisheye view. I don't know how long I stood like that, but eventually my legs began to tremble, and I forced myself to back away. Whatever game was being played tonight, I wasn't going to be the one to open the door and invite it in. I turned toward the living room again, and that's when I heard it. From inside my apartment, a single, deliberate footstep on the wooden floor. I didn't turn around immediately. Something primal inside me knew better. Predators, real ones, can sense when you notice them. If I spun around too quickly, I'd reveal I was aware. So instead, I kept my eyes fixed on the wall ahead, forcing my breathing to remain steady even though every nerve in my body was screaming. Another footstep, this one closer. It was the kind of sound you can feel through the floor, a faint vibration that travels up through your legs before your ears even register it. I swallowed hard, my throat dry and tight. My mind scrambled for explanations. The building settling, pipes, a neighbor's noise, but those didn't fit. This was the slow, weight-shifting creak of a person stepping forward, barefoot by the sound of it. The wood under my cheap rug groaned softly with the pressure. I turned, slowly, deliberately, my muscles resisting every movement like I was pushing through water. The living room was exactly as I'd left it. Exactly. But the shadows seemed deeper now, more textured, like they weren't just absence of light, but layers of something else. Something watching. I glanced toward the far corner, the one just beyond the arm of my couch. It had always been the darkest spot in the room at night, even with the street lamp filtering through the blinds. My stomach clenched. There was shape there. Not a full silhouette, nothing that the rational part of my mind could fully latch onto. Just an area where the dark seemed heavier, denser, a human-sized patch of more. I blinked. It didn't move, but it didn't disappear either. The air had a weight to it now. My ears popped faintly, like when you're descending in a plane, and I realized my breathing had gone shallow, rapid. I forced in a slow inhale, but the air felt thick, almost humid, as if someone had just been standing inches from me, exhaling steadily. The fridge hummed in the kitchen, and the sound seemed to echo unnaturally. My apartment was small, but it had never felt this endless. Every wall felt further away than it should be, yet the shadows pressed in tighter. "Who's there?" I said, my voice low, steady, or at least pretending to be. No answer. I stepped closer to the corner. Each step felt like wading through molasses, my socks catching faintly on the rug, my heartbeat in my ears so loud it blurred my thoughts. When I was about 3 feet away, I stopped. I knew. There was nothing good waiting for me if I got closer. The heavy patch of dark seemed to lean forward, just slightly, the way someone might shift their weight to get a better look at you. My skin prickled. Then, without warning, my phone rang. The sound was so sudden and loud in the silence that I jumped, spinning toward the coffee table where it lay. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. No name, just a string of digits I didn't recognize. I stared at it. The ringing seemed too loud, almost metallic, like it was coming from inside my skull rather than the phone itself. After the third ring, I reached for it, my hand trembling. I pressed the screen to answer. I didn't speak. Neither did whoever was on the other end. All I heard was breathing. Slow, steady, deep breaths. Not the rushed, nervous kind, but the calm, measured inhale and exhale of someone who knows exactly where they are and exactly where you are. I was still facing the phone when I realized the breathing wasn't only in my ear. It was behind me, too. I froze. The kind of freeze where your brain is still screaming at your muscles to move, but they're ignoring every command. The sound behind me was so close, I could almost feel it brushing the tiny hairs on the back of my neck. A slow inhale, then a longer exhale, like the person was savoring the air between us. My grip on the phone tightened. The plastic was warm now, my palms slick with sweat. Without turning around, I lowered it from my ear. The line was still open, still carrying that same steady breathing. But it was no longer possible to tell which was coming from the speaker and which was coming from the room itself. I knew I couldn't stand there forever. My body's need to act finally overpowered the instinct to stay still. I turned, quick, sharp, my heart hammering so hard I felt lightheaded. The corner was empty. At least, it looked empty. But the darkness hadn't gone back to normal. It clung to the walls, stretching in irregular shapes, as though the shadows themselves had been disturbed. I stepped forward and swore I felt a change in the air. Colder now, but with a strange, static charge, like the air right before a lightning strike. The phone in my hand clicked. Not a normal call drop. This was sharper, almost mechanical, followed by a faint TCHK. TCHK, TCHK. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Then the line went dead. I stared at the screen. It was black. No missed call notification. No log of the number that had just rung me. Like it had never happened. I wanted to put the phone down, but a thought hit me hard. What if I need it? That's the thing about fear. It makes you cling to whatever scraps of control you think you have. So I kept it in my hand, holding it like a lifeline as I backed away from the corner. That's when I heard something else. From the hallway. It was faint at first, like fabric brushing along the wall. Then a slow, deliberate creak, one floorboard at a time, moving closer. My hallway was short. No one could walk down it without reaching my living room in a matter of seconds. But this sound, it was stretching out, each step separated by an unnatural amount of time, as though whoever, or whatever, was out there wanted me to count each one. 1 pause, 2 pause, 3 pause. The 4th didn't come. Silence pressed against the room again, thick and absolute. I stared at the dark slit of hallway entrance, my mind racing through possibilities. If it was a person, why hadn't they come in? If it wasn't a person, what was it waiting for? I couldn't stand in the open like this. I started toward the kitchen, not because I thought I'd find safety there, but because there's something comforting about grabbing a knife, no matter how useless you suspect it might be. The tile under my socks felt icy. The overhead light flickered once, then steadied, casting long, sharp shadows across the counter. That's when I noticed something on the counter that hadn't been there before. A glass of water, clear, still, and full to the brim. I don't keep glasses on my counter. I hadn't poured it. I hadn't heard anyone pour it. I stood there, staring at it, the silence roaring in my ears. And then a drop of water rolled over the rim. Not spilled, pushed. It slid down the glass, caught the light, and hit the tile with a soft, deliberate plink. From the hallway came the 4th step. The 4th step landed heavy, but not in the way a normal footstep does. It sounded like it was being placed there, a weight lowered carefully onto the wood, rather than simply walking across it. My breath was shallow now. I realized I'd been breathing through my mouth, trying to make less noise, but left my tongue dry and tasting faintly of copper. I still had the knife in my hand. My knuckles were white around the handle. My eyes stayed locked on the hallway entrance, waiting for the moment I would see a shadow break the frame. Something solid, something I could understand. But nothing appeared. Instead, the lights flickered again, harder this time, and the glass of water on the counter trembled, just slightly, but enough to send another droplet over the edge. Plink! That sound was the signal. From the hallway came a slow, rising hiss. Not a snake hiss, not even close. This was wetter, like air being forced through something organic. The sound vibrated in my teeth, made my eardrums ache. The hallway darkened. Not because the lights went out, they were still on, but because something was blotting them out from within the darkness itself. And then I saw it. Not a face, not even a full body, just an outline, too tall for my ceiling, bent at strange angles to fit, its edges twitching in ways that didn't match how things are supposed to move. It didn't walk into the living room. It leaned, its head, if that's what it was, lowered toward the doorway, joints popping quietly in the distance between us. The hiss grew sharper, and the air grew heavier, each inhale feeling like I was swallowing glass. I couldn't move. I couldn't even think, until it stopped hissing. It stayed there, head cocked as if listening for something inside me. And then, it smiled, not with a mouth. The shadows behind it pulled back, revealing rows and rows of pale shapes. Teeth, jagged and uneven, stretching far wider than any head should allow. The knife slipped from my hand. The sound of it hitting the tile was deafening in the stillness. That's when it moved. Not toward me, but past me, faster than anything I've ever seen. My hair whipped across my face as something massive rushed by, its movement silent except for the low, rattling breath it left in its wake. When I spun around, the kitchen was empty. The hallway was empty. Everything was as it had been, except the glass of water. It was gone, and in its place was my phone. Screen lit. A new message waiting. 3 words. Don't drink it.